Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the show. My name's Gavin. This is my channel. Glad you are here. Today, we are going to jump right in. We're returning to our coverage of the, actually, it's not the case of Karen Reed. It is our victim here is John O'Keefe, a 46-year-old Boston PD officer who was killed January 29th, 2022. And his girlfriend, Karen Reed, is on trial for his murder. I have a special guest that I'm going to bring on here in just a minute, but I want to start with just a couple of instructions. Number one, I think there's going to be a lot going on in the chat today, in the live chat. If there's anything that you want me to see, what you need to do is just make sure that you have GF put into your chat. That way I'll be able to filter through and I'll be able to see it. So just remember to put GF in there so I can see it. Number two, this is a hot button case. This is a case that causes a lot of us to have kind of our cockles up, our emotions are raw. There doesn't seem to be a lot in the middle. The followers of the case seem to have bifurcated. You guys know that I had Sean McDonough on as a special guest a few weeks ago, and I really appreciated him coming on to see his point of view. Today, we are going to be going to the other side, to a different point of view, and I just want to make sure that you guys keep it respectful in the comments. I have my mods in there. Say hello to Autumn and Jamie. Those guys are awesome. The ladies are going to keep us civil. So no name calling, no doxing, no, all the stuff. Okay? I want to keep it civil. All right. With that, I'd like to welcome my special guest, Jennifer Coffindaffer. She spent 28 years in federal law enforcement, specializing in organized crime and violent crime. She is currently an expert witness for Eagle Security Group and a News Nation contributor. You can find her here on YouTube. I have linked it in the description down below and in the title of this video. It is Break the Case with Jen Coffindaffer. Jen, thanks for coming. I appreciate it.
Gavin, thanks so much for having me. You and I first met through a very important case, the Ellen Greenberg case, and I really appreciate how we've worked together on that case. Whenever I've reached out or you've reached out, it's nice to have that sort of partnership and passion for justice for Ellen Greenberg.
Well, yeah, we both do. That is a very important case, and one that I am so glad that you have covered. And there's just so much to that one. But you're going to get me down a rabbit hole of Ellen. I love her. I love her parents. But today we're talking about John O'Keefe, right? Can you give us just the 2-minute rundown about this case?
Absolutely. So on January 29th, 2022, Officer John O'Keefe, who was dating Karen Reed, his girlfriend at the time of 2 years, they were partying out with friends. They'd been out for many, many hours and 2 different bars. Toward the end of the night, they were at a bar called The Waterfall. While they were there, the group of friends said, "Hey, listen, we're going to move to my house." A guy named Brian Albert, who was a fellow Boston police officer. He said, "My son is having a birthday and there's a few people over there, very small. His son is very quiet, not the partying type." And he just invited everybody over, and everybody said, "Yeah, let's go. It's midnight, let's clear out of here. It's closing down and go over there." So what's undisputed is all of that. And what is undisputed is that Karen Reed drove in her Lexus SUV, John O'Keefe, over to 34 Fairview, the home of Brian Albert, this, as I said, fellow police officer. That is where the agreement ends. According to the prosecution, and we're seeing this play out now, there was a heated fight between Karen Reed and John O'Keefe. Specifically, their relationship was on the rocks for a lot of reasons. And they got in this horrific fight where she said many expletives, lots of F-bombs, lots of I hate yous. And when he got out of the car, she moved forward and then put it in reverse and gunned it and hit him, causing him to suffer and sustain injuries that left him unconscious in the snow right there on the curtilage on the very far right corner as you would be leaving the house of 34 Fairview. According to the prosecution, what happened was he exited the vehicle, walked into 34 Fairview to this small gathering, this birthday party for Brian Albert's son, and Brian Albert, an ATF agent named Brian Higgins, and a 17-year-old named Colin Albert decided to beat him mercilessly, essentially, and then dump his body out on the front lawn.
Oh, this is according to the defense. This is the defense's side.
Right. So I
Gotcha.
just
Okay.
did both sides in a nutshell. So
Gotcha.
that's one side and then the other side.
Gotcha. So, okay, the prosecution is saying Karen Reed, John O'Keefe gets in a fight. He gets out of the car. She moves forward, then backs up over him, leaving him where he lay and takes off. The defense is saying, no, no, no. He got out of that car. He went into the party, and these other guys, they beat him to death and threw him out on the lawn.
Right. They talk about beating him to death or, murdered him in this way. But what is very interesting that doesn't really fit with that narrative was he was alive. He was alive for many hours. He was pronounced dead in the hospital the next day.
Okay, so before we get into those details, let me ask another couple questions here. I don't think I've told you this, but last week, I was in court all week covering a local murder case for my day job, right? So, of course, they trotted in all sorts of witnesses. Some of them brought in their CVs. They were examined about their background, and then it was the prosecution in this case would move to the judge to admit that witness as an expert witness. Now, you said that you do serve as an expert witness. This would be something that you do for a living, right? Can you tell my viewers what it means to be an expert witness in court?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am hired to particularly look at cases, a huge, broad spectrum of cases in various venues. As an example, I've been hired by the U.S. Attorney's Office to represent an FBI agent in Los Angeles. Another case in New York, hired by the U.S. Attorney's Office, again, to represent Yonkers policemen and the FBI in that case. Another case for the defense is a case where an individual was beaten pretty mercilessly. I've had, so many cases. I currently have 4 cases that are active right now, and it's the complete gamut. But what happens is you receive all the materials from that case. So I receive boxes of cases at my house, literally thousands and thousands of documents. And what I do is I take them and I read them letter by letter, catalog them, and try to make sense from an objective eye what happened on that case. Now,
Based on what? Based on your law enforcement experience?
Based on my law enforcement experience and working and being a part of the law enforcement community for 28 years. So it's my background in that makes me qualified as an expert to testify on these sorts of cases. Sometimes they're cases, I had a case recently where an individual killed another individual in a dispute. So I looked over that case. But the bottom line is, for me, and I think for most people who are legitimate experts, we don't even take a case. I provide an hour consultation for free where I listen to everything about the case. I even have them send me their documents. Sometimes I just took a case like this, and I looked at everything. I spent more than an hour, couple hours, and I said, I can't take this case. I can't, in good conscience, support your position. They wanted,
Gotcha.
They were saying self-defense. So anyway, but I don't mean to belabor the point, but basically you look over the case and then you write a report. The longest report I've written was 110 pages long. It was on an attempted murder case. And I think the shortest report was about 10 pages long about a Freedom of Information Act request against the Bureau. I was on the side of the person that was against the Bureau. In fact, I've taken two of those cases. So I'm about 50-50 right in there. 50% of my cases are kind of on the defense side and 50% are on the plaintiff. For me, what dictates that is if I believe in the case. If I don't believe in it, I just don't take it.
Okay, so that leads me into a question that came from one of my Facebook. I have a Facebook page. I'll just show on the screen here real quick. Called the Fish Tank. Fans of Gavin Fish. I know. That's how we roll around here. And I asked people to give me actual questions for Jennifer Coffindaffer, not like I just tensions run real high on this case, and so I've asked people to just give me actual really good questions about this case for you. One of the questions that came in was, how familiar are you with the case itself as far as looking at the court records and all of the documents that have come out in the over 2 years, like 2.5 years now, that this case has been leading up to the trial, which of course is happening right now? How familiar are you with the case?
On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being an expert case that I have to be deposed on, that I have to go to trial for, that I know inside and out, being a 10. On this case, based solely on public records and now the trial testimony, which I've watched 90+% of every word spoken by every witness so far. And we've just finished 15 days, hours and hours and hours of testimony. I would rate myself at an 8.
Okay,
I'm
so
very familiar, in other words.
very familiar. Not quite
I'm
up
not
to
familiar.
you've been given the case file and you're searching through it, but you're confident in the case.
I'm very confident in the case facts.
So the next question that I got that I thought was a fantastic question, especially for somebody like you who has been watching 15 days of trial, do you think that there is reasonable doubt in this case as far as the guilt of Karen Reed? Do you think it's possible that a jury listening to the witnesses and seeing the evidence in this case could come to the conclusion that there is reasonable doubt here and could acquit Karen Reed?
Well, first of all, to have a reasonable discussion regarding that question, we have to establish what the charging documents say, as well as what the current charges exist in terms of the indictment. And when you look at that, there's really 3 charges at hand. There's a second-degree murder charge. There is a manslaughter charge, basically the vehicular unintentional homicide, if you will. And then there's also leaving the scene of an accident resulting in death. So there's really 3 charges we're looking at. And also, even though we're on day 15, we have there are 70 plus witnesses for the prosecution, and we have just unfortunately just hit the tip of the iceberg in terms of testimony. So it's just not at a point where any jury should be deciding, or any person should be deciding guilt and innocence. Remember, guilt and innocence is decided by a jury in a court of law, whereas a person can have done a crime and not be found guilty. And sometimes people don't do a crime and are found guilty. So there's 2 different issues here, whether somebody is guilty of a crime versus whether somebody can be legally convicted of a crime. So that's all to say, Gavin, I don't know, that can't be decided, in my opinion, right now by any reasonable person in terms of whether she is going to be convicted or whether there's reasonable doubt. It's way too early.
Okay. I think that's fair to say. I mean, that's actually one of the things that a judge's instructions at the beginning to the jury is to keep an open mind, right? Judge the credibility of the witness in front of you, listen to what they say, see if you believe them or not. They are really the sole judges of the facts in the trial, right? Yeah, I think that's fine. So the next question that I got that I thought was a really good question was, and I'm going to quote it here, I'm curious as to how Jen assesses the competence or not of the Canton PD's investigative department. They're specifically bringing up the novel use of the red Solo cups, the grocery bags, and the leaf blower. What are your thoughts on that?
Okay, so in terms of this crime scene, the initial responding agency to the crime scene was the Canton Police Department. And those officers, and there was leadership there, not just street officers, but actually their leadership, meaning their sergeant, and then I believe even his boss was also there. And the decision was made according to courtroom testimony now, and this is great because I can reference that. In other words, facts and evidence now. It was about, according to the officer, a 6 by 7 foot area where John O'Keefe was laying that was looked at by them. It's also
Okay.
critical that anyone looking at this case understand this was one of the worst blizzards in history. You can all look it up. They got between 22 and 26 inches of snow, depending on where you lived. At the point that they came across John O'Keefe initially, there was 6 inches. Again, now, this is according to testimony. So it's
So I'm sorry,
facts
this
and
is
evidence.
kind of the beginning of the blizzard? Like they wouldn't be
Well,
out partying in a blizzard, right?
the blizzard really began, and actually so many decisions were made early on in terms of when they were going to leave and where they were going to go and who was going to be where, because of this blizzard that was impending, the different vehicles that are driven, different delays in officers getting there because they didn't have the proper vehicles that even could get through this blizzard. There was a lot of impactful decision making that was based on this blizzard, Gavin.
Okay.
When the blizzard, though, in terms of snowfall and howling winds and deeply cold temperatures began well at midnight. I mean, much before that. You can see in the videotape when they exit the waterfall bar, you can see the snow blowing, you can see the wind blowing the flag just crazily. I mean, these are huge. I know a teeny bit about wind only because I'm a tennis player. So for me, wind, when I'm going to have a match, the first thing I look at, what kind of wind are we looking at? And so I know if I'm dealing with a 25-mile-an-hour wind, I know what the flag looks like. I
Yeah.
know how it feels. I know what happens to my hair. That was this kind of night. We could all look it up and see how much it said in Canton at midnight, but just watch the video and you're going to see the terrible conditions and the impending, and not really impending, the beginning of this blizzard.
Gotcha.
So during
Okay,
this
so we're in this
process,
6 foot by
6 inches
7 foot area.
area.
Yeah.
Thank you for keeping me back on track. And so they decided, because they could see blood. And it's funny because I did see different things people had said that were just blatantly false about this. And we know now because we can see in trial these Solo cups. There were 6 Solo cups utilized to retrieve blood that went layer by, that was all in the snow. So it wasn't 6 drops or 1 drop or 2 drop. That's ridiculous. That's why they had Solo cups, because that blood had permeated all this snow. So how they chose to do it, first of all, the Solo cups, that is 100% out of protocol. They should have acquired sterile evidence containers to collect the snow. They decided not to do that, and I'll tell you why. Again, this is all facts and evidence for the jurors to decide.
All right.
They didn't have any receptacles that they could use. All their receptacles were like test tubes and were this big, and they couldn't do it. So what they did was they went across the street to one of their police commanders and he had a bag of unopened Solo cups, which he gave to them to collect the blood. Totally out of a normal protocol. Completely. I agree with all of that, all the people saying that. But you also have to look at the undisputed item that's in those Solo cups. Everyone agrees it's John O'Keefe's blood. That's what they collected. It was John O'Keefe's blood.
There
So yes,
wasn't any other trace evidence or trace DNA or anybody else's DNA in that. It was strictly his.
strictly John O'Keefe's. So
Now,
when you look at the impact, I mean, you know.
yeah. No, go ahead.
So how they did it, and I've thought a lot about this. Initially, when you hear a snowblower, you're taken aback, right? What are they using a snowblower for? But this is what they did. They perfectly documented everything, Gavin. They had a videographer that watched, they took photos, and they very slowly removed layer after layer of snow in this area to meticulously look for items in this very small area. This is a huge yard. And again, 6 inches of snow. And you know what would be the normal process? First of all, I would submit that a handful of agents, officers, law enforcement have ever had to deal with a blizzard conditions, collecting in such conditions. It's really unheard of.
So was the blizzard still happening as they were collecting this evidence, or his?
Full blown now, Gavin. Now
Okay.
it's downpouring. So you have 6 inches and they got an additional 18, 20 almost inches, depending on which report you read. No, this was,
Okay. Gotcha.
for instance, another misnomer that has been said, and it's just false, is that they didn't put up a crime scene tape and that they didn't try to block off the crime scene. That's just false. It's on video that they showed in trial. The problem was the wind is whipping it. I don't know how many miles an hour, certainly 25 miles an hour, maybe more. I don't know what the gusts were. And you could see them putting up the tape, and it's just flying all over. They're trying to affix it to different objects, and the wind is so powerful, it's blowing that crime scene tape down. So it was just a physical impossibility to put up the crime scene tape with what they had, the conditions they had.
Who
So
were the
this-
ones that were in that, getting back to that 6 by 7 foot kind of area that they're looking at? Were those just run of the mill officers, or were they detectives, or were they forensic services unit? What were they that were gathering
They were
that
just
information?
the Canton police officers and a sergeant, for sure, a sergeant. And then I think even one step above the sergeant.
Okay.
So their crime scene, and I can tell you in all my years of doing crime scene and working ERT matters, in terms of being the person responsible for evidence at a crime scene, I never had to collect in conditions like that. And the fact
Okay.
that they improvised to get through the layers using a snowblower, if you think about it, it sounds terrible. You almost picture these people with this huge snowblower and evidence going everywhere. That isn't how it was done. It was a meticulous blowing of the snow. And I would argue, how else could you do it? It's a
Okay.
blizzard.
So getting back to the viewer's question about assessing the competence, I mean, it sounds to me like you're saying that this is actually evidence that they were competent, that they were coming up with ways to collect evidence in the middle of a weather pattern that they wouldn't be trained on how to handle evidence, I guess.
Yeah, I think
Is that fair?
not the solo cups, not usage of the solo cups, but yes, Gavin, I think improvising with that blower. And again, they did such a small area. This is a huge yard. I wish the whole yard could have been done this way, but they were in the middle of a blizzard and the crime scene was turned over very early to the state police. They were responsible. So after they finished with that small area where they recovered the glass that John O'Keefe had taken on film that you can see in the trial, he took a glass from the waterfall. You can see it's in his hand. And he takes that and he takes it presumably out of the car. He's got the glass when he's hit. And that's why all these shards of glass, I believe, cut his arm when he's hit by the car. And that's what causes these very superficial, this is according to the medical examiner, her words, superficial abrasions caused by a blunt object. Not dog bites, no
Okay.
penetration,
So this
nothing
gets
like
into
that.
the dog bite question because after Sean McDonough told me about that, I took a look and, just being a home sleuth, not having the long CV that would be admissible in court, obviously, right? I looked at it and I thought that those look like dog bites to me. That's very, looking at other pictures and so forth, they look like dog bites to me.
It's interesting, obviously. I mean, I've heard lawyers, just armchair sleuths, anybody and everybody say, oh, that must be a dog bite. But this is what's really sad about this case. That picture that everybody is looking at, people are looking at, that was leaked. That was a leaked photo from poor John O'Keefe in his dying moments that the family, I can tell you, is sick, was leaked about John O'Keefe. It should have never been leaked. And those pictures, depending on which one you look at, is so adulterated. It's been so changed and, color, what do you call those? When you make somebody look different.
Yeah, like photoshopped and stuff. Is that what you mean?
No, I mean, when you put, I'm sorry, on your phone and you can pick how you look.
Oh,
There's all
like
these little
filters.
filters. So
Yeah.
sometimes it looks bright red, sometimes it looks, but if you look, uh, those are slight, and if you read the autopsy, uh, uh, portions from the autopsy that are available to everyone to read.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not getting special information. It's all been filed with the court, part of the autopsy, the ME's words, and she describes it very specifically, very minor abrasions as the result of a blunt object like glass.
Okay, so I very much do not want to impugn anyone's character here, but I just went through this in court and then looking at transcripts from another case. So when I was doing this, when I was covering this murder trial locally, the forensic pathologist, who is not an ME, he works in a coroner's office, but he's a forensic pathologist, MD. He's been doing it for 30 years, 5,000 autopsies. That guy is the best. He is the best witness I have ever seen when it comes to medical examiners. That guy knows his stuff and can communicate it to all the rest of us plebes who have no idea about anything that he does, right? And then I talk to other former prosecutors that go, "Oh man, if I had so and so as my ME, I wouldn't even want to take this to a jury. That person is so dumb." Right? How can
Right.
I? So the ME that examined Mr. O'Keefe, Officer O'Keefe, how is she regarded as far as her professionalism, her going back to the Ellen Greenberg case, man, Marlon Osborne missed so much, right? So how is this ME in Officer O'Keefe's case?
Well, were actually two because it
Okay.
was re-looked at. And I have no reason to not believe either of these MEs that testified to this. But let me tell you the kicker. Because of this assertion that, by the way, most people don't realize, this third-party culprit idea came so late. And I heard the whole reason that somebody came in, and I can tell you this, that person wouldn't testify to any of that because it was rubbish. But Yannetti, at the beginning of this case, got on those courtroom stairs. I have the recordings, there's two of them. And he says, she did not do this on purpose. I'm paraphrasing, but that's what he said. This wasn't on purpose. This was an accident. She loved him. They admit it. They admit she's responsible, but it was an accident. This is manslaughter. This is not anything that was purposeful. And he
And
says
then the third party defense came later.
yes,
Okay.
yes. And that is for people who have watched this case and who have been entrenched in it from the get go. We can't erase all of that. All of that is there. But the problem is people got in so late. And then, a lot of people, I think, have unfortunately exploited the concerns that many in that area have, which is public corruption concern. And I get it. I worked public corruption for the FBI for years. It's also such a misnomer to say the FBI is investigating the killing or the death. It's
That
ridiculous.
well, that
We
is one of the
investigate
questions that I had is the question that came in. Why do you think the FBI is investigating the investigation? Is that a fair characterization of what the FBI is doing?
Yeah, was doing, and I think it is a fair investigation, but I think people need to understand the nuances of that. What happened was the defense team for Karen Reed was the one that took this case to the U.S. Attorney's Office to be investigated. So understanding the complainant, if you will, on the case was Karen Reed and her defense attorneys. I think that's very important. Number two is
Okay.
understanding who the U.S. attorney was at the time. Her name was Rollins. Rollins had since had her law license removed, was forced out of office for corruption. And in fact, I
Okay.
actually did hear she got her law license back, I think like a week or two ago, of all things. But she was completely forced out as the U.S. attorney. And she and the district attorney in Norfolk County cannot stand each other. They had a huge issue, and that was the person that made the decision to go forward with the investigation. I think that's also very important.
Is it
That's
the
just a
U.S.
fact.
Would the U.S. attorney be the one that engages the FBI to investigate the investigation? Is that how it starts?
It can be. A case can be predicated in many different ways. If you go to the U.S. Attorney's Office and they ask the FBI to investigate, that's much more powerful than when we as investigators oftentimes go to the U.S. Attorney and ask for our cases to be prosecuted. So it can happen that way. But a case had to be predicated, meaning there had to be what was believed by that agent when they wrote the case opening memorandum. You have to, what we call, predicate it. I have to write it all out. This is supervisor. This is why I think we need to put FBI resources and money and time into this case.
Okay.
Then they are going to approve it.
So that is similar to the way a I don't know, a police officer or detective would have to convince a judge that I have probable cause to make an arrest. You, as an investigator, need to convince your supervisor, hey, I've got a case that warrants investigation.
Yes.
That's fair? Okay. All right. So another question that we had that came in from my viewers is wondering about your impression of how the chain of custody was handled as far as the evidence in the case. I know that you said that the Canton PD started the investigation, then turned it over to the Stadies. So how do you think chain of custody, how did they do as far as maintaining chain of custody?
Well, first of all, that is something that we're not at in the trial yet. We are only in one aspect, and that was those solo cups with the snow in it. We know that that was kept in a freezer type setting, not in an evidence vault. And when they turned it over to the state police, we can see a picture of it. And that picture is where you're talking about the shopping bag or grocery bag, I should say. So evidence bags, we do have evidence bags, and they should say evidence on them. And actually, they have places where you sign your name and you date and so on and so forth. And you should be using that. This was like a Stop and Shop bag and save, whatever you want to call it, bag. So that was another faux pas. That was another mistake that was made, because you should utilize proper receptacles for evidence. So these are two faux pas. Then when it's handed off, they sit it down, and it's again, this is facts and evidence, approximately 3 feet, maybe up to 6 feet, depending on the person that testified, away from Karen Reed's vehicle that was in the Sallyport when this transfer took place.
Okay.
So it's not a chain of custody issue, it's an evidence handling issue. That should have been kept, but my belief is that they don't have a freezer in their evidence room. I mean, the FBI has state-of-the-art evidence rooms, but these are little bitty local departments. How often do you need to have something frozen in your evidence room?
Right.
So they, again, improvised for the situation they had, but they should not have made that exchange anywhere in the zip code of that vehicle. Not because I think that the Solo Cup got blood on the car, or the blood got, on the Solo Cups, some transfer. It just looks bad. It's just not proper handling procedures.
And thinking about that kind of thing, I was going over another case last night where the case that I was doing was Corey Richens out in Summit County, Utah, which is actually like, that is where my people are from. My grandparents all grew up in Summit County. I lived in Summit County as a little boy before we moved to California. All of our family vacations out there. So I've had lots of interest in that. I believe, again, being a armchair quarterback here, but I believe that there is good evidence that indicates that she is guilty of murdering her husband. But there was a complaint that the prosecutors were violating her rights protected by the Sixth Amendment by listening to her jail calls with her lawyer. I don't want any of that, because I want her convicted if she, indeed did the crime. So this is one of those things where you're like, if they're botching, if Karen Reed did indeed kill John O'Keefe and she gets off on a technicality because the Canton PD botched evidence, then that sucks, right? Or the inverse is the same. If she is innocent and is convicted because of that, I'm using the word botched, but whatever we would call that, because of that mistake, then that also, that causes the wheels of justice to seize, does it not?
Well, in this case, this isn't about something that is a technicality that would overturn a case. What this is about is not handling that evidence properly in terms of putting it in an evidence vault and the exchange, possibly, correct? So
Okay.
the worst thing that could happen is that blood evidence isn't allowed. That's the worst thing, and everybody agrees it's John O'Keefe's blood. So that's why I'm saying is you really have to consider, but the jury could consider, well, if they botched this, did they botch other things? But they've
Exactly.
already gone through. Remember, the Canton police was only involved in just this much of the investigation. And believe me, they've been raked over the coals about the Solo Cups, the grocery bag, and the
The leaf blower.
and the leaf blower.
Yeah.
So they've
Okay.
already shredded the Canton police. They're not involved anymore. They recused themselves. So there's really not much more that's relevant in terms of the crime scene.
Okay. I think we went
The
over
cup.
the dog. Yeah.
Glass is important, because this is my thing, Gavin. If you're to believe that he was murdered inside by these two officers and a 17-year-old, why in the world would the cup be in pieces, shattered in the snow? It wouldn't be. It's ridiculous. And why would his cell phone be underneath him? How many men put their cell phone in their back pocket? My husband does. I do
Okay.
when I have chips on. These are logical. So the one thing you learn in the FBI Academy, you learn, I went through Federal Law Enforcement Training Center with the federal agency I was with before the Bureau for 3 years. Every bit of training I've ever learned, one of the premises is Occam's razor.
Mm-hmm.
Typically, the solution or the what leads you to make sense of something is the easiest route. The other route is so difficult. He went into the house, a guy that was a fellow police officer, who, by the way, was never fired, never put on leave, was in a very high position with Boston police in terms of when you're on a fugitive task force, or you're heading, he was on television for being one of Boston's finest. You're going to, all of a sudden murder somebody, an ATF agent who, by the way, is still an ATF agent. You think if there was an ounce of proof, the federal investigation was 3,000 pages long. People don't understand, in a federal investigation, in a grand jury case, in a public corruption case, sometimes no one is ever charged. And that's what we saw here. There's no perjury charges, there's no charges at all, because they're an investigative grand jury. So they've investigated, they've turned it over, and that's where we're at. A lot of people don't understand that.
Gotcha. The that does ring true to me, Jen. Like I have some friends that were long term. They're married, and one of them was a Pennsylvania State Police detective, and she was a Florida State Police detective, and we got together on this case out of Georgia, and I kept zeroing in on all these little things, and they're like, Gavin, oh my goodness, you got to stop, man. Those things don't matter. This is, look at this, look at this, look at this, right? So that training that the rest of us that are home sleuths and, internet sleuths, we haven't had. I've heard that from them, and then from Tom Brennan on the Ellen Greenberg case as well. What is the most likely, the most obvious, is usually the thing that actually happened. All right, so I'm glad that you brought that up. We talked about the dog a little bit, but somebody asked, is the dog a red herring? I mean, so I think the definition of a red herring is just to distract, right? Is this going to be something that is probably put in front of the jury once the defense puts on their case, that is just there to cause doubt?
Well, the prosecution went into this case in their order of proof. Unlike any case I've ever seen, I've been pretty, I haven't supported how they did that. Not that they care what I think, but it has made no sense to me, the order of proof, but I see what they did, what they're doing. They decided to do their order of proof to discredit the third-party culprit in the beginning of their case instead of presenting their case. So right now, we're finally starting to see their case. And then they're going to build it backwards, because I think they want the jury to last see the case. So I totally agree, and I'm glad the prosecution is hitting this third-party culprit defense head on. So they're already, if you can believe it, sort of, disparaging or disproving the defense case, even though the defense hasn't put it on. They're basically putting it on for the defense so that they can.
It's good strategy.
Yeah. But yes, to your listener's question, it is a red herring. The two big red herrings in this case, and there's two huge ones, the dog and the 227, that phone call happened, or this Google search occurred at 2:27 in the morning. Those are the two big red herrings.
Why is that Google search a red herring?
It's a red herring because it didn't occur at that time. She entered through Safari. And on an iPhone, when you go through Safari, she was Googling Ozone basketball, different scores. This was at 2:27 in the morning. They had just gone to bed. She's sitting there running through her phone, Googling basketball scores. She's a coach. Her kids are athletes, or they're basketball. She brings that up. This is in testimony. They're athletes. And so she likes basketball. So she's Googling that. And now it's open, and that writes to a WAL file, and it's saved under that timestamp. And then at 6:30-ish in the morning, she Googles how long to die in snow twice, because Karen Reed is screaming at her saying, oh my God, is he dead? Is he dead? I hit him. How long to die in the snow? And so Google it. She's screaming at her. This isn't testimony. This is facts and evidence. And so she Googles it. And that's why she wrote HOS, because it's a frantic moment, the how long to die in snow. So, that's the misnomer. There's two. There's a Celebrite expert that will be presenting, and another expert. Will the defense have an expert? They will have an expert, and they'll have to look at this. But I've seen the court documents already. They're available for anybody else to look at, and this has already been asked and answered, but it's a red herring out there in social media.
Still, people believe it happened at 2:37 in the morning.
227.
2:27. Sorry. Okay.
They have shirts and everything. So,
Well, that one of the things that a lot of people I've been noticing, and I'm not able to put my finger on a specific instance, but even in the fish tank and all over Twitter, people are just saying, "Oh, that's perjury. That's perjury. They're lying. She's lying. He's lying. That's perjury." I don't even know how to formulate a question around that. If people believe that they're lying, then they're just going to believe that they're lying. I mean,
it's very interesting what I've seen, and it's almost like a script and fill in the blank. In other words, no matter who's on the stand, the people that are pro Karen Read they're lying, they're being deceptive, they're part of a conspiracy, and then you just put everybody in the blank. This is the problem. You've got 70 witnesses you have to put in the blank. There are paramedics that have nothing to do with this case, that don't know any of these players, that have spent 15 years, one of them. All he's ever done since high school was medicine as an EMT and a paramedic. This guy is as white as snow. And he's the one that said, one of the several that heard her say, "I hit him, I hit him, I hit him."
Okay, speaking of the paramedics, you said something a little bit earlier that I wanted to loop back around on, that he died in the hospital. Now, when I talked with Sean, he, if I'm remembering this correctly, and I'm very sorry I didn't prepare this, it's just something that you said reminded me of it. His belief, he told me, is that O'Keefe died much earlier and was pronounced in the hospital. What is the facts and evidence? Was he alive when he was taken to the hospital?
The facts and evidence is he was alive. They actually got a heart rhythm that they described. I believe it was which arrhythmia was it? I can't remember. I'm an EMT, and I can't remember which one they said that they picked up. But they picked up a heartbeat, basically.
Okay.
And so he was not pronounced dead out there. They were trying to save him. His hands were white and palsied like this, having had no circulation, which is frostbite, basically.
Right.
They were white. His nose, his face, they said, was just frozen.
So he's in hypothermia. The body's trying to stay alive.
Oh, yeah. And
Okay.
and I also remember a misnomer that Sean had said. He said, well, since he was out there from 12 to 5 in the morning when he was found, they didn't even leave the waterfall until 12. I mean, no one can seem to say exactly when this fight took place, but we know people were leaving. Everybody was basically gone by 1:30 in the morning. So,
Okay, so
it went into the night.
If we believe the prosecution, then Mr. O'Keefe was hit around midnight-ish. Is that when it happened? Okay.
Well, a little bit after that, 12:30-ish.
Okay. So half past midnight, around that time frame. As people are leaving the party, how are they not seeing him?
Well, for anybody who's been watching the trial and watched this footage, it's unbelievable. First of all, it's black. There's not one street lamp. I've been to that property myself. There's no light out there. There's a huge bush. The property is undulated. It's not flat. They sit up high and then it goes down. So it's undulated. There's a fire hydrant there. There's a flagpole. And this is in the furthest corner. So if you're facing the house like this, it's in the furthest left corner. From inside the house is the furthest right corner. if you see where it is, you would see why people who left from a door that was in the middle of 34 Fairview, there's the front door, and then there's a middle door that's midway down the house, and then there's
Okay.
a door that goes to the garage. Everybody came in and out of that middle door, and it was snowing. And according to facts and evidence, the people who left, it was so snowy and cold, and they were worried about slipping. So most of them were watching the sidewalk, making sure
They're
they didn't
looking down.
fall.
Gotcha.
And their cars were all to the far left, Gavin, in the driveway. So it was in the opposite area that they would have ever looked.
Okay. Gotcha. Let me just quickly go through a couple of questions live here, see if we have anything that, let's see. Flux asked, what did you do in the law enforcement community? We know that you were in the FBI. Can you describe your 28 years in federal law enforcement for us?
Oh gosh, do we have that much time?
Quick, 28 years, just like that.
That's a lot. I'll keep it very, very brief. For the first about 3 years, I worked for the Office of Inspector General with their unit in the Department of Agriculture. So what does that unit do? What we did was we investigated things like food stamp fraud. So I worked undercover going to mock up stores that were really just there. I would come in with $100 in food stamps. They'd give me $50 cash. I'd go out back and buy crack cocaine from the crack dealers. And that's who we tried to take down, things like that. I worked payment limitation cases, which were gigantic fraud cases. Where farmers would get these gigantic subsidies pretending to be dozens of people instead of just one person, set up all these false entities. I worked things like cancer-eyed cows that were dead in the field, and I'd be out there on my hands and knees in the middle of the night with my night vision goggles, watching people pick up these dead cows, slaughter them, and then put them in the school lunch programs. That's the kind of work I did. It was the best work. I actually really loved it. And as an ag agent, you were from beginning to end. It's not like in the Bureau that you have rotors to do your filing, a stenographer to type up your reports, an evidence clerk to keep your evidence. You did everything. And so it was the perfect environment for me to really grow and learn, and it was amazing. And then I went over to the FBI. I never thought I could ever possibly get into the FBI. First of all, I was a woman. There were only 3 in my class. I was I'm a midget. I'm so short. And there were very few women getting in at all. And I thought there's absolutely no way I'm going to get in. And I was just felt so blessed when I did get in. I went immediately, my first assignment was to the Houston division. And in the Houston division, most of the time you have to work applicants for a year or 2. I was very blessed because of my prior law enforcement experience. They put me right on an organized crime, violent crime type squad. Mm-hmm. And that was, just running and gunning, really amazing work.
So how many years did you spend in the FBI?
25.
Okay. All right. Wow. Let's see.
Years in the FBI as an agent. Not as a clerk, but working cases.
All right, here's a couple more questions. Did authorities polygraph anyone at all? You actually know, I think I shared this with you once. My uncle was an FBI special agent and spent the latter years as a polygraph expert, and then later, he worked as a civilian for the FBI doing polygraphs. So I know the FBI puts a lot of stock into lie detector tests. Do you know if anybody was polygraphed in this case?
No, I don't believe they were, and I'm a huge believer in polygraphs too. I mean, as an agent, we get polygraphed about every 3 years to keep our security clearances, and I'm a big believer in them. I didn't used to be, and I had I basically told our main polygrapher, I said, I'm not really buying that this works. His name was Gary Steger. He said, sit down. He said, write out 10 numbers, 1 through 10. I did. I can't remember the exact number I chose, but he said, pick a number, put it in your pocket. I put it in my pocket. He said, all right, I'm going to ask you which number you have in your pocket, 1 through 10. And I went, we went 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way through 10. He goes, just give me that number 5 out of your pocket right now.
It worked really well.
Yeah. And I remember telling myself, I've got number 2 in my pocket. Please don't say 2 or whatever. I can't remember the
Oh,
exact
you
number.
were trying to fool him.
Oh, I was. I told myself. I mean, I started pinching myself on certain things to get my blood pressure up. With pain. I tried to do all these things, and you can't fool the machine.
That's funny. Okay, Deanna Bellina asks, um, outside of watching the trial, how many documents have you read that are publicly available in this case?
Dozens, dozens and dozens and dozens. In fact, on my phone, I have a whole John O'Keefe file, and in that file, I mean, I've just got dozens and dozens and dozens of documents and excerpts from documents. And then um, on my email, dozens, I mean, hundreds of pages. Just look in the last motion, how long that one is. The response to the motion to dismiss. That's the good stuff, because that's where we find out that Brian Higgins and Karen Reed are having a fling, if you will, some sort of tryst, which of course gives more evidence that they weren't getting along.
All right. Let's see. Deanna also asks, where did you get the info that no other DNA was in the blood snow dirt mix that was left in the grocery bag for days? It's a little bit of a prejudicial question, but you get the question. Where did you learn that only John O'Keefe's DNA was there?
Well, John O'Keefe's blood. That was in something, and I can't remember, but I will say this, and this is why she asked a very good question. Although the documents are a good indicator of everything, because they show what are in the police reports, and it shows what's in the MEs. We have never seen the full autopsy. No one has. We've never seen all the autopsy photos. We've never seen so much. And so her question, you're right. I should not emphatically say that until the DNA experts are on, and they haven't been on yet. So I'm going to retract what I said, and I'm going to say that until those DNA experts say that, I defer my comment.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah,
Good.
you're right.
All right. Oh, I got a compliment here. Ellen Greenberg is a heartbreaking case. It is indeed. Both Jen
I'll
and
agree
I.
on this, Sugar Magnolia.
Yeah.
I don't know how you stand on this case, but we can all agree, I think, on the Ellen Greenberg case.
I think you're right. We have not bifurcated into camps on that, or at least the other camp is a very small club, for sure. Okay, last one here. It says, my Fairview lady, what a great handle, says, Gavin, can you please discuss the many butt dials?
Yeah,
Jen, can we discuss the many butt dials? Tell us about that.
Butt dials during sex, and butt dials, with the phones at different spots. Look, it was funny. I was actually discussing this case with my son. My son's just what I call your average Joe, right? He's an educated college student. He's becoming a pilot. He's, not a true crimer, but he's just a common sense guy.
Okay.
So I was discussing this case with him, and I mean, he actually couldn't stop laughing on parts of it. And then I mentioned this. I said, well, let me tell you, one of the reasons that a lot of people are upset about this case is because there's calls according to the call log, but they weren't answered. In other words, it's going to show possibly, we haven't heard that testimony yet, so I'm also holding off. I want to hear what the people say about those calls. But what these people, meaning the witnesses, are testifying is, listen, they went unanswered, or they were pocket dials. And you know what my son said? He said, I fell asleep last night and I pocket dialed somebody. He goes, literally, I rolled over or something on my phone, and I freaking pocket dialed this girl that I didn't want to pocket dial. And so he said, I believe that. It was just funny that I asked him right at the moment he did one. So I pocket dial all the time. People I call it pocket dial because it's usually when I put it in my pocket or I have it laying and it hits something. So unless the experts come forward and say this could not have been a pocket dial, this was somehow picked up and words were spoken, I have to believe that because I know it happens to me and I know it happens to others.
Yeah, we see that all over the Allen Greenberg case, by the way, too. Okay, last question. I know I already said last question, but a super chat came in. Gemini says, autopsy shows blood loss. Where is the 2 liters plus?
So this is very interesting. Again, we haven't seen the autopsy report. Nobody here has. So anybody who says that they've seen the autopsy report, that is false as far as I know. So I don't know exactly what they're referring to. But think about this fact, and that is, his head was cracked, and we know that. And there was blood loss, we know that. But two things. First of all, it would have gone into the ground, right? Because at that point, there was just a light dusting of snow. And second of all, in other words, that was the main exit point of the blood. And second of all, when you are in sub-freezing temperatures in the 20s, your blood is going to clot and coagulate extremely quickly. And I'm not speaking as an FBI agent. I'm speaking as a EMT since 2003. That's just what happens. And so I believe the blood loss that was sustained was much less than it would have been had it not been freezing cold.
Okay, the 2 liters, I mean, that is not something that has actually come out as a fact in the trial or any of the documents. I don't recognize it, but I haven't followed
If
it.
she's seen it, I'd be happy to look at that. But no, it certainly hasn't come out in trial. I'll be interested to see what really happened. 2 liters is a lot.
Yeah, that would be quite a lot of blood. Well, Jen, thank you so much. I've kept you for an hour. I really appreciate you coming on and having, I appreciated that about Sean as well. Like, we can talk about this like adults. We don't have to yell at each other and scream at each other. We can agree, we can disagree. We can agree to disagree sometimes. I appreciate you coming on and sharing your thoughts on the case. Come back anytime and let me know how I can help your channel too. Everybody needs to go to Jen's channel, Break the Case with Jen Coffindaffer. It's linked down below. Thank you for coming.
Gavin, I want to thank you, and I also just want to give a quick shout out to your audience because they were great in terms of these questions. They were very thoughtful, and I love to discuss evidence and facts. So thank you for having me on. You have a great audience. Thank you.
Thank you. Glad to have you here. All right, everybody, that is it with Jen Coffindaffer. We will continue our coverage here from time to time on the John O'Keefe murder case and the trial of Karen Reed. And, I encourage you, if you have not already, head on over to the Fish Tank and check us out over there. Become a member of our little growing community over there. You can always go to my website if you want to reach out to me. It's gavinfish.com. There are lots of cases over there, lots of documents and so forth. It really is a lot of fun over there for a true crime aficionado. All right, with that, I will bid you adieu, and I will see you on the next one. Take care. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you liked what you saw, please consider subscribing. And if you have any questions or comments, please leave them below.